This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast and the Becker Business Minute Podcast. This discussion today is on the role of the former CEO or the role of the founder. This is, I think, a fascinating discussion in American business. There is one concept that says you have to get the former CEO, the former founder, as far away as possible so as to not stand in the way of the new CEO, of the new leadership, and to sort of get out of the way. There's also a concept from a private equity perspective, a business perspective, that we're far better off being able to show the investment world that we're not reliant on that past CEO or that past founder, that we've grown into a serious institution, totally regardless of that person. And so that is one school of thought that strongly says you sort of ditch the founder, ditch the past CEO, get them out of the way. And certainly in a lot of leadership circles, this concept of not having an old CEO or an old founder hanging around is embraced as the elixir, as truly the way to go. The other concept is, in some situations, that former CEO, that former founder might have been the creative juice or the strength in some ways behind some of the company's efforts, even though obviously any success is built on a whole lot of next level leadership and the next level leadership or some combination thereof. And I think this discussion is a fascinating discussion. And there may be one answer to it, which is you get rid of the founder, you get rid of the former CEO. But I do think that the truth in many of these situations is somewhere in between. I think it's a fascinating debate. I've seen in most companies, most companies I've been involved in, truly the discussion has been that the former CEO, the former president, sort of stays out of the way as much as possible, is like almost like a child. You're supposed to talk when spoken to, and that may be the right answer. But it is a fascinating thing to watch in sort of American business, American culture, sort of, it's almost heavy is he or she who wears the crown, because once that crown is taken away, people sort of want to make sure you're out of the way. And I think that's a fascinating thing. It is the unusual CEO or founder or leader that could stay involved going forward and make sure that they're not trying to overshadow at all the current great leadership. And I think it's a fascinating discussion. And obviously, some former CEOs do this remarkably well. You look at people like Bill Gates, who did an incredible job of turning the company over to Steve Ballmer, and then the next successor, Satya, who I'm spacing on exactly the pronunciation of the last name right this moment, or other CEOs have done just this fantastic job of turning over leadership. And then there's other CEOs, the Bob Igers of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Larry Ellisons of the world, that feel like they will never go away. Many of those, though, doing a tremendous job. Mark Benioff, again, one of the returns of the former CEOs, again, still doing, by all accounts, a magnificent job. But a fascinating situation as to what's the right decision. Do you move the former CEO, the founder, out and sort of strengthen and say to the current core, you are it, or is there some wiggle room where that former CEO or founder has some involvement? And always a complicated issue. And it strikes me that if you're going to keep the former CEO or founder around, there's probably boundaries and lines to be drawn as to how that works exactly to avoid the current CEO and current leadership feeling like there's a dragon breathing over their back or that's undermining them or submarining them. But a fascinating discussion on the role of the former CEO, the role of the founder when leadership has been transitioned. Thank you for listening to the Becker Private Equity and Business Minute Podcast and the Becker Business Minute Podcast. A lot of good arguments on both sides of this question. I see more often the former CEO moving away sort of quietly and not trying to overly impose their judgment and their position or situation on the new leadership. But there's probably room for lots of in between in these discussions. Thank you for listening. If you've listened to this fully, and the first person to text me at 773-766-5322, we'll send you a $50 Amazon gift certificate. Thank you for listening to the Becker Business Minute Podcast.